You ready? Here's the pasuk. You ready with me?
Yeah.
You and I. Vaydaber Moshe al Rashei Matot Bnei Yisrael Lemar, Zeh Davar Shetziva Hashem. Okay. Ish, a man, ki yidar neder laHashem, or yishava shvua, le'asar Yisrael nafsho, to prohibit something on himself, lo yachel devaro. He should not ignore his words. He should not violate his words. Kichol hayotze mipiv ya'aseh. Do whatever he says. That's the basis for neder. And if you don't go against your neder, you're over a lotase of lo yachel, which is a lotase. Don't do it. You get makod, and you bring a carbon, etc. We discussed all of this. But today we're going to discuss the next pasuk. An isha, a female person. Ki tidar neder laHashem, asor yisar beit avia benura. This is the most important pasuk for this one. If she's in the house of her father and she's a minor, a nar, not a minor, a nar, and her father hears about her neder, and what she said. The father's quiet, then kamu kol nidara, then her neder is chal, it applies. If the father disagrees with it, right, he says no, then neder doesn't mean anything, she can do anything. Lo yakum. Okay, so a father to his daughter who's ne'oreha. Okay, we'll see nar, what a nar is. What if she's married to a man?
Then he annuls it.
And she has a neder. Then Shama Isha, her husband hears about it and he's quiet, then she has a neder. But if he hears about it and he's mefer means he uproots it. He says, no, I don't like it. Then it's no neder. Okay? Continue. In Beit Isha Nadara, she makes a neder in the house of her husband, right? Then, if her husband hears and he's quiet, it counts. If not, it doesn't count. So the big question that you and I are going to discuss today, apparently since we're the only two at Daf Yomi, it's recorded, it's going to be on the internet, is why do the three times? It says first, if she makes it her father, can be mefer. If she's married, her husband can be mefer. But there's this middle case, right? Where it says, if she's married to, if she hayot ish, then the husband can do it. It doesn't say anything about the father. But it's weird, because if the husband can do it here, what are you saying it again here in this pasuk? In Beit Isha Nadara, then the husband can do it. So we're going to learn in our Mishnah, I'm giving away the whole daf right now, that there's three categories. There's a woman who's living in her father's house. She's not married. Her father has full control. She makes a neder, her father can say no, her father can say yes, her father can say nothing. That's what matters.
Or just on the thing.
So the obvious point, which is not our today's Gemara, is that if she's a ketana, she can't make a neder. If a 6-year-old girl says, I'm never having candy again, that doesn't mean anything. If she's a gedolah, her father has no control over her. The only time the father's control is if she is in between. She's what's called a na'ara, which is for women, as opposed to men do not have this, right? Women have this state where between the age of, we'll say maturity, which I'll define in a second, to 12 and a half, let's say, they're called na'ara. And they're, because I think, I'll give you my interpretation, though I don't know if it's right, is that because they really used to get married at that point. So it was assumed that once you're old enough, you're really married. If you're not married, you're in your own reshut. Your father doesn't have any control over you, 12 and a half.
Right.
Free woman.
Perfectly normal.
But below that age, you're still somewhat mature. You can make a neder. You can understand what you're saying. The Gemara elsewhere in the Erchin really says that actually it does not start at 12. It starts at what's called mufla samuch li'ish, when you're wise enough close to being a person, meaning a year before. So it's 11. Really, it's 11. Depends on the kid, of course. Some kids are not so smart, but 11 to 12 and a half. So that's, your father can be mefer. If you're married, the husband. If you're in between and you're what's called a na'ara, right? That's na'ara means the category, and you're orasa, you're only engaged, but you're not married. Now remember, Eresin is marriage, right? If that woman's married someone else, she's chayav to be killed for Eish, but you still live in your father's house. So that's called na'ara murasa. In that period, that's where the middle pasuk is talking about. She's in her father's house, but she also is married. Ish. Then it's her husband and her father of Mifir Nidara. Not one, not the other, both. We need both of them. So let's learn that now in the Gemara. Now that's the whole daf. Okay. Okay. Perek Pair 10, sorry. Daf Samach Zayin is today. Samach Zayin, page 132. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Samach Vav Amud Bet. Na'ara Murasa, a woman who's a Na'ara who's engaged, Erison. Avia Ubala Mefirin Nidara. Both her father and her husband are needed to be Mefir her mother. Hefira Avla Hefira Bal. The father says, I don't like your netter. You know, the woman says, I'm making a netter. I'm never going to wear deodorant, right? Father says, that's a terrible idea. Lo Hefira Bal, Bal doesn't seem to care. Or Mefir Habal, Hefira Bavla Hefira Av. Ein Mufar. Netter is not Mufar. She has to do it. She has to live with it. If she doesn't live with it, she gets chayiv for violating her netter. And certainly it doesn't have a hafara if one of the people said, I want to actually keep this netter. So now it's a new concept. Not only can a husband say or a father say, you can't do your netter, they can also say it's a good netter. They can support it. A woman says, I'm making netter, I'm not drinking any more alcohol. It's a 12-year-old girl. And the husband says, great. Maybe the husband says terrible. The father says fantastic. It's not mufar. It says Gemara 1 second. I know Resha. Why do you need to? The whole Mishnah seems like it's redundant. You said everything you said in the first line, which is her father and her husband have to be fair and neder. Why do you then continue and say if one does it, not the other, it's not enough? Says Gemara, Avio Bala, if you're why don't you just say that? Ma'ad said, would have thought, oh, Avio Bala, it means either. It's saying, look, if she's young, if she's not married, it's her father. If she's married, it's her husband. If she's Naramu Asa,
It's just one of them.
it's one of them. So that's why the Mishnah has to tell you, no, both of them. One and not the other is not enough. Kamash Malan. And then we finish the Mishnah by saying, well, that's ridiculous for sure. For sure, that's not the case. Hashta, even if the father was quiet and the husband said, I want to be Mefir, it's not enough. So certainly if the father said, I want to keep it, it's not going to be enough. What's the chiddush, right? Hashta, now, Yesh Lomar Hafar Zeh Below Zeh. If one does me hafara, but the other one doesn't, it does nothing. If kiyem echad mehem lamali, what if you tell me that if one of them says I want it to be, that it's not going to be mefair? Says well, no, tzricha. There's a lot of different gersot here. Well, let's just read it this way. Tzricha, you need the Mishnah because tzricha lemitni ki itzrichle ki gon de hafer echad mehem v'kayem echad mehem. What happened was woman made the netter. She's not eating whatever green beans. One party, the father, let's say, said, that's a good netter. Never eat green beans. Husband said, no, I love green beans. I don't want you to have that netter. And then the father decides, oh, wait, the husband doesn't want to have the netter. Maybe I'll change my mind. You can change your mind.
Not have errors.
No, change your mind and not have the netter. Instead of saying have the netter and be mekayim the netter, the father says, no, okay, I'll be made for your netter. I don't want to make any fights with your husband, right? We'll discuss later how you can do that. But anyway, so what happened was this. She made, one of them was hafara chamem, so her husband made a hafara, meaning he said, I want your netter to go away. And kiyem echad mehem, and one of them, let's say her father in this case, said, no, I like your netter. And chazar ha-mikayem v'nishal ha-hakamato. The one who was mikayem the netter said, no, I changed my mind. I no longer want it. I made a mistake. I didn't realize her husband didn't like it. So I want to change my mind. So ma'adatima, I would have thought, my du'uki ha'akre. So that's good enough. The fact that the husband said, let's say the father in this case, I no longer want to be Mekayim the netter. So now the netter should be good, right? Should be no good, sorry. Again, the woman made a netter. The husband said, I don't like that. Hafara. The husband said, I like it. Whatever, I said that. So the father said, I like it. Then the father said, I changed my mind. I no longer like it. So you might think, okay, it's gone, but it's not gone because what the father has to do is say, I don't like the netter. It's not enough just to remove my approval, right? Great, Kamash Malan, the Mefir and Shneim Bevatachad. The Chiddush is they both need to do hafara together. The Rambam brings a machloket, the Rambam and the Rambam about whether, in fact, the father can change his mind. Meaning, if he initially says, "I wanted to stand," and then he later says, "I no longer mean that." So, according to the Ramban, he can then later say, "Okay, and I want to be made for the netter," and he can combine with the husband, right?
Okay.
But you understand the language?
I mean, I think so.
But according to the Rambam, you can't do that. Anyways, that's the Rambam discusses. Continues the Mishnah, or at least continues the Gemara. It's actually not the Mishnah, but these words are learned from the Mishnah. The halacha is Nara Hamurasa Avia Ubala Mefira Nidara. A A woman who is a na'ara, meaning she's between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, or 11 and 12 and a half in this case, and she is engaged to be married. She's murasa, which again was different than our engagement because it's really chal. A woman who's a na'ara murasa, both her father and her husband have to say, we don't want your neder to be stand in order for her neder to be canceled. Okay? Unlike a woman who's not married, Erison, or a woman who's completely married. If she's young, her neder doesn't do anything because she's not smart enough to make a neder. But if she's not married, but living in her father's house and she's a na'ara, so na'ara who's not morasa, then her father can be made for her neder. If she's nisua, then only her husband. But if she's a na'ara who's morasa, then both her husband and her father need to be made for. Ask the Gemara min nalan. How in the world do you know that? Now, you and I just read the Pesukim and we derived it. The Gemara's, I of course had the benefit of learning the Gemara already. So it says the Gemara min nalan. Amar Rava or Amar Rabba. Amar Kra, because look, this is what the pasuk says. This is what the pasuk says. Vim hayoti elish, right? You and I read this pasuk. I'm going to pull it out again because we apparently don't have anyone else to talk to. Im hayoti elish, right? So we said here, isha kiti go neder. With me?
Yeah.
Then, and her father hears about it, gets rid of it. But im hayoti elish. So it says the Gemara now that pasuk is if she's to a man. Mikan the nara murasa shaviu bala mifir nidara. This pasuk basically tells you the Ran understands that it means the following. But in the first part of the pasuk, Parsha said her father's mifir. Then it adds if she's married, then her husband, implying and her husband, her father also, and now we're adding her husband. Okay. Says, well, how in the world do you know the pasuk is referring to a woman who's erison? Maybe it's talking about a woman who's completely married. That
says later.
Maybe this pasuk is nisua. It says, answers the Gemara. There's another pasuk. It says later. Keep reading. You're very good. Right, the pasuk down here is a third one. So we don't need another pasuk for that. Well, maybe you need two maybe you need two to tell you that a woman who's married, her husband's made for her neder. What's the chiddush? The chitema, 2 lines in the bottom. Trey cry b'nisua lamali. Why would you need two psukim? Lamemer, maybe it's telling you she'ein habal made for bekodmin. A new halacha that you didn't even think about, which is, what if she made the neder before she got married? What if a woman made a neder? No, they didn't hear about it. They didn't hear about it. It's not a time thing. It's a knowledge thing. The husband, right? So it's not a time thing. Right? Let's say a woman makes a neder and says, "I'm never taking a shower," and 5 days pass, and her husband's like, "Wow, you really smell." And she says, "Oh, it's because I made a neder. I'm not taking a shower." He can make for the neder that day. Like the Torah very clearly says, "Look, just look inside." Shamad via, right? So the time he hears about it, it doesn't matter when she makes it. So the question is, let's say she made a neder, she's never going to take a shower, or not take a shower for 30 days, let's just say, before she got engaged and married.
I thought he can't because her father would have been responsible.
The father didn't mind it, let's say.
Right, so why would he be able to change it and it was approved?
So you can't. But that's the chiddush, because you might think that when a husband gets married, basically.
So what we're understanding from this is that a husband can't retract a father's thing, not that both the father and the husband.
Look what the pasuk is here. Right? If she makes neder when she's married. So this pasuk very clearly implies it, not a woman who got married and already had a neder. Right. So maybe this pasuk is talking about when she's married. Right? Because this pasuk sounds very different. It says she melts up. So it sounds like. So maybe the chiddush of this pasuk is no, don't make that reading. That's wrong. It's only Nedarim that are after the fact.
Okay, fine.
So maybe it's telling you, and these are the words in the Gemara, or the last words of this Amud, she'ein habal mefer bekodmin, that a husband cannot be mefer Nedarim that preceded his marriage. Maybe that's the chiddush. Says the Gemara, no. This is lav memila shalom. Don't you understand that automatically? You know that from every pasuk, because look, even if you only had one pasuk that says that a husband can be mefer her nedarim, you would understand he only became her husband now. It's only what she made a neder after he was mefer. So you don't need a separate pasuk for that. So the fact that you have two psukim must be that one is to tell you a husband who's nesua, and the second is to tell you a husband who is arusa. Arusa. Okay. And now think about the husband is arusa, as the Ran understands. and the Gemara too, is that he can't do it alone. He can do it with the father because he's not powerful enough to do it alone.
The father could do it alone.
Only if she was not a Russia.
Wait, no, but the implication of that the husband needs the father.
And the father needs the husband.
Oh.
Once she's a Russia. Meaning,
Why would the father ever need the husband until she's actually married?
Because
Arusa,
well, that's one way, but Arusa is a middle ground because she's both committed to a husband and she's legally committed. Like if she wants to leave him, she's gonna get.
Okay,
right? But she also lives in her father's house. So obviously her father's a very big vested interest in her showering or eating green beans or whatever it may be. So I think that's why in that state you need both. It says in on top, I got a whole nother answer. It could be because if you look at the words in the pasuk, let's read it. Im hayotia lisha, it doesn't say like this pasuk in Beit Isha, she's in the house. It says hayotia, and the words hayotia always imply erison. That means havaya. Because havaya kiddushin mashma, the words havaya mean they're together. They're not living together. They're committed to each other. That always refers to erison, or can refer to erison. Says okay, great, but I don't understand. Ema av l'chudei mefer. You got the second line. Maybe the father alone can be mefer. Maybe the Torah doesn't preclude the father from a daughter who's or erison from the father can be mefer. Says Gemara, what are you talking about? In Cain, what about the pasuk? The pasuk says. Asra Isar Beit Avia Yaniota. Right, this pasuk back here. If she made an Isra in her father's house, the father gets rid of her neder. Right. So if the father can get rid of neder, right, when she's already erison, of course the father can get rid of a neder when she's not erison.
Right.
Why would you need the earlier pasuk?
Because that's it.
So it says Hashta Yeshlom Makam Arus Mefer Av L'Chudei. You want to say that when the father when the woman is engaged, the father can get rid of the neder by himself. Shaloba makam arus miboyav, right? Miboy, sorry, right? Would you need a pasuk to tell me that the father needs to get rid of her neder? Of course he can. So clearly, but when she's not arus, the father can do it by himself. When she is arus, he needs the husband. Okay. Says Gemara now, well, Ema, but maybe say it this way. Maybe you got it 6 lines from the top. Ema av libayarus. If the father wants to get rid of her neder, he needs backup from the husband, right? But maybe arus l'chudei mefer. Maybe the father, the arus by himself can be mefer. Maybe it's enough. She's engaged. Correct. The father's not enough on his own, but maybe the husband is enough. Right, if that's the case, what do you need the father for? So why does the Torah imply that the father has a role? Maybe to tell you, hakim. Maybe it's telling you the opposite. The father can keep it. But let's say the father is quiet. Maybe the father has no power to stop it. So maybe the father has the power to uphold it. Woman makes a neder, right? She's not going to wash for 30 days. And the father says, good neder. Then the husband can't get rid of it. You understand? Maybe.
Why?
Because the father has enough power. She lives in his house. He has power over her. He can uphold her neder. But maybe if the father is just quiet and says nothing, and the husband says, I don't like that at all, it goes away. Meaning, our Mishnah said they both need to say it, right?
You have to have like an opinion.
Both need to be mefer, but maybe that's not the case.
You have to have an opinion.
So how do you know that? I mean, maybe the halacha should be that the husband can get rid of her neder by himself, even though she's an arus, and the father's role is not that he needs to get rid of the neder. It's just that if he said, I like it, then the husband can't get rid of it. Because in Cain, if that's the case, what about the following, the last pasuk, in Beit Isha Nadar, right? Which says, if she's married, her husband gets rid of her neder. Says, that's a kal v'chomer now. If it was true, now read the kal v'chomer. When there is a father there, because she's only engaged and she's still living in her father's house, right? But the arus is mefer l'chudei. You're telling me now that maybe the husband could get rid of it on his own. So certainly, if she's married and she's out of her father's house, shalom makom av, you wouldn't need a pasuk,
right?
So the fact that there's a final pasuk that says when she's married, the husband does it, means that when she's not nisuah, it's not just the husband; it's a combination of the two of them. Of you need them both. Says Gemara, the Ema, again, the Gersa here is very unclear. In Beit Isha Nadara Lomer, She'ina Bal Mefer B'Kodmin, Uminei Arus Mefer B'Kodem, Elalav Mishum Shut Vatei Da'av. So the Gemara's question here, which with her outside, is that maybe the whole point of the pasuk in Beit Isha Nadara is to tell you that, like we said on Amud Aleph, that the husband cannot be made for what was married, what she said before her kedusha, right? The problem is this for her marriage. The interesting halacha is that can a father be made for b'kodmin? It's a trick question, because there's no kodmin, the person he's her father from birth, right? Kodmin means a shvuah that was made, a neder that was made before they got into a relationship.
But her and her father were always.
Her father was always in a relationship. So the father, obviously, there's no such thing as kodmin. A husband cannot be made for b'kodmin, meaning if a woman makes a neder and then she gets married. Now, to be honest with you, what a husband can do is he can say, "I was misled." Right? So maybe if a husband was smart, he would ask his wife, "Do you have any Nedarim that I should know about? Any promises, anything you can't, any foods you can't eat, any allergies?" Right? And she says no. And then after they get married, she's like, "Oh, by the way, I don't eat soy." He might be able to say, "You married me under false circumstances," but he can't be made for that. He can't say, "Oh, you made a neder against soy 3 months ago that you're not going to eat soy for 2023."
If it's like that's not a condition. Give you like
If it's a neder, it's the puzzle. It's a neder.
No, I'm saying if he like I was trying a conversation, but he didn't make it like as part of the like.
So we actually discussed this a lot. We'll discuss it more in Kedushin, that it depends on how fundamental it is. I mean, there are certain activities that people assume are so critical, like bathing, let's say.
Okay.
But a neder has a specific halacha, right? And so the husband can't say to her, "Oh, you made a neder that you're not going to wash your hair for 12 months. I just found out about it a month after the wedding, I guess, whatever, it didn't have such a big impact. It's too late. You can't be made for it. But a husband who's an heiress can. Interesting. A woman, a nara murasa, let's say she's a nara.
When she's in between.
She makes a neder that she's not going to eat meat for 12 months. She gets engaged to a guy. The guy finds out about the neder. Her father finds out about the neder. They're like, "This is a terrible idea." They can be made for her neder. Even though she hadn't made the neder at the time that she got engaged. She had made the neder at the time she got engaged.
But her dad didn't know about it.
Right. Her dad didn't know about it, but her husband didn't know about it. Once she's engaged. So then, because remember, if her father knew about it before and he didn't say anything to the nedders, it's good. But now the father finds out later. So the father can get rid of it, but the father can't do it by himself because she's already in someone else's property part of it.
So it was made before, but not.
So she needs the husband. But the husband now can do something that he couldn't do once she was already nisuah, which is fascinating, interesting. Because he's got the support of the father, he can go beyond what the husband can normally do. Because a normal husband can't do it, but this husband can, but only with the help of the father. And that's the Gemara says on the bottom. He needs the help of the father. Let's read one more line, just because we have it. It says Rabbi Yishmael Tana in the learning in the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Yishmael, they taught that in fact it's based on the pasuk at the end of the parsha. It says Bein ish leishto, bein av lebito. It says these are the things that the Torah taught between a husband and his wife and a father and his daughter. And what that tells you is that there's a circumstance. This is how Rabbi Yishmael learns it. Rabbi Yishmael, where the husband and the father are both critical in the relationship. You need both. Mikan, we learn from there the Naram Rasa Shavio Bala Mefirin Nedarim. We learn from there that both a father and a husband are needed because this is one situation where you need both the husband and the father, and that's the middle case. And that's where he learns it. Tomorrow we'll discuss why he doesn't do it from the other place. That is today's daf. It's short. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Thanks,